The rain over the old transit district did not fall so much as it hesitated, as if even the weather was unsure whether it still had legal permission to exist. Neon signs flickered in languages that had been updated 3 administrations ago, and the ground beneath the cracked platforms hummed faintly with buried data cables still trying to pretend they were part of a functioning civilization. He was not supposed to be there. Officially, the area had been declared a non-essential memory zone, which was bureaucratic language for "we stopped caring about this place after it stopped making money." Unofficially, it was where people went when they wanted to disappear without filing the correct paperwork. That was when he saw her. At first, she looked like a woman who had simply taken a wrong turn through reality. Human-shaped, yes, but with long ears that curved backward like elegant antennae catching signals no one else could hear. Her skin reflected the dim city glow in subtle, shifting tones, like her body couldn't quite decide which version of light it preferred. She stood very still, as if movement might trigger a system alert from the universe itself. He almost walked past her. Almost. Then the soldiers arrived. They came through the broken archway in synchronized steps, armor marked with the insignia of the Interurban Compliance Directorate, which sounded important enough to justify ruining someone's day. Their boots hit the ground with rehearsed confidence, the kind of confidence that only exists when you are holding enough weapons to misunderstand every conversation. "Subject confirmed," one of them said, scanning the air where she stood. "Non-human biometric signature detected." She tilted her head slightly. Her long ears shifted, catching frequencies the soldiers' equipment could not translate. She whispered something under her breath, and for a moment the air around her shimmered like heat rising from metal. The lead soldier raised his weapon. "Do not move." She blinked slowly. "I was not planning to," she said, in accented Earth standard. Her tone suggested she found the situation mildly inconvenient, like someone had scheduled an emergency during her lunch break. That was when he stepped in. He did not plan it. Planning would have required logic, risk assessment, and at least one survival instinct. Instead, he simply moved between them, as if his body had forgotten to consult his brain. "She's not causing trouble," he said. A pause. One of the soldiers looked at him like he was a malfunctioning appliance. "Civilian interference is classified as obstruction." "That sounds dramatic," he replied. "Have you tried maybe, not escalating everything you see, just as a hobby?" The soldier did not appreciate the suggestion. Weapons shifted. The air tightened. Somewhere in the distance, a drone recalibrated its interest in their location. Behind him, the alien woman leaned slightly forward. "Your intervention is statistically unwise," she murmured. "Yeah," he whispered back without turning. "I'm starting to notice Earth has a pattern of that." The soldiers advanced, and then, very softly, she lifted her hand. No explosion followed. No dramatic beam of light. Instead, the sound around them simply folded, like the world had been briefly embarrassed and decided to skip ahead. For exactly 3 seconds, everything stopped. Rain froze midair. A falling advertisement drone hung suspended like a confused insect. Even the soldiers, mid-step, were locked in expressions of bureaucratic outrage. In that impossible silence, she grabbed his wrist. "Move," she said. They ran. When time resumed, the soldiers fired into empty space, their shots carving bright lines through rain that had already forgotten what it was doing. They did not stop running until the city felt distant enough to pretend nothing had happened. Only then did she release his wrist. He bent slightly, catching his breath, and laughed once, short, disbelieving. "So," he said, "you can pause reality." She looked at him with the calm seriousness of someone explaining a minor technical feature. "Only briefly." "That's comforting. I was worried you could do something useful, like fix traffic." She did not understand the joke. She recorded it anyway. Somewhere above them, the drones began to search again, patient as mathematics. They moved after that like 2 problems refusing to be solved. The city did not make it easy. Every district they crossed seemed to have its own opinion about strangers. In the lower grid, the streetlights flickered in Morse code that nobody officially admitted was still active. In the upper layers, hovering traffic platforms rearranged themselves to avoid liability rather than collisions. Somewhere in between, a public announcement loop kept insisting that all anomalies are under control, which was usually how you knew they were not. She walked slightly behind him at first, her long ears angled backward as if listening to a conversation happening inside the fabric of the world. Every few steps, she would pause, tilt her head, and write something in a thin, luminous slate that appeared from her sleeve like it had been waiting for permission to exist. He glanced at it once. "Is that your ship's log?" "It is a behavioral observation record," she said. "Your species exhibits compulsive noise production during stress." "That's called talking," he replied. "We invented it so we don't have to think too loudly." She considered this seriously. "I will note, thinking loudly is inefficient." They hid that night in a maintenance corridor, beneath a transit spine that had not carried passengers in years. The walls still vibrated faintly with ghost roots, as if trains remembered their schedules even if reality did not. He found an old service terminal, tapped it awake, and was rewarded with a message that simply said, "Access DENIED, please try again later with better authorization." "Even the machines are passive-aggressive here," he muttered. She crouched beside the terminal, long ears shifting slightly as she scanned its structure. "Your technology is emotionally defensive." "That's fair." Above them, drones passed in slow, sweeping arcs, their searchlights slicing through dust like interrogations. Every so often, one would pause, as if considering whether silence itself was suspicious. She watched them. "They are persistent." "They get that from the government," he said, "and from unpaid overtime." She blinked. "Is unpaid overtime a form of punishment?" "It's a form of tradition." That seemed to concern her more than the drones. At some point during the night, she tried to understand human rest. He woke up to find her sitting perfectly still beside him, staring at his breathing as if it were an unsolved equation. "Are you okay?" he asked. "You reduce activity for extended periods without threat response," she said. "I am testing whether you are malfunctioning." "I'm sleeping." "You appear vulnerable." "That's the idea." She made a small note. "Your species voluntarily disables survival functions." "Fascinating." "Yeah," he said, rolling onto his side. "We also do it for fun. It's called weekends." She repeated the word softly. "Weekend. 2 days where we pretend consequences are fictional." She wrote faster after that. By the 3rd day, they learned the rhythm of being hunted. It was not constant violence, it was worse. It was patience. The soldiers did not rush anymore. They narrowed zones, adjusted probabilities, and let the city itself do half the work. Sometimes the air would change temperature slightly, and he would know they needed to move. She, however, began noticing something else. "They are not only tracking us," she said one afternoon as they moved through a crowded market sector disguised under failing holograms. "They are learning your patterns." "That sounds flattering," he said, dodging between 2 floating vendor platforms arguing over pricing rights. "I didn't think I was interesting enough to study." "You are statistically inconsistent," she replied. "That attracts attention." That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me a problem. In the market, she tried something called blending in, which involved standing very still next to a fruit stall and attempting to imitate human indecision. A vendor offered her synthetic apples. She picked one up carefully. "Is this real?" The vendor shrugged. "Real enough." She turned to him. "Your commerce is philosophically uncertain." He whispered, "Don't ask it philosophical questions. It will charge you extra." She recorded that too. Later, when the drones passed overhead again, she tilted her head and listened longer than usual. Something in their signal changed. A tightening, a focus. "They are close," she said. He exhaled slowly. "Define close." She paused. "Within the range where your survival probability becomes irritatingly low." "That's very you." She looked at him. "And yet you continue to remain near me." He shrugged. "I figure if I'm going to have a low survival probability, I might as well make it interesting." For the first time, she did not immediately write that down. Instead, she watched him for a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to understand why an unarmed species would repeatedly stand in front of things that could erase it. Then the lights above the market shifted, and every drone in the sector turned toward them at once. The moment the drones turned, the market stopped pretending it was a market. Holographic fruit stalls froze mid-flicker, vendors quietly stepped backward into non-involvement zones, and even the floating signage seemed to adjust its brightness to something closer to denial. The air filled with the soft mechanical hum of coordinated targeting, an industrial lullaby that nobody ever wanted to hear directed at them. He exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "I think we've reached the part where things usually go badly. She stood beside him, long ears angled forward now, no longer listening to the city but to something far beyond it. Her luminous slate unfolded in her hand without gesture this time, as if it had decided urgency was no longer optional. "They are not only soldiers," she said. "They are a retrieval protocol." That sounds worse than soldiers. It is significantly more enthusiastic about consequences. The drones descended slightly, not attacking yet, waiting, calculating, learning. He looked up at them and sighed. "Do they ever get bored of this? I feel like I would get bored of chasing two people around a discount apocalypse." She glanced at him. "Your humor increases under threat." "Yeah," he said. "It's either that or screaming, and screaming charges extra in most districts." A flicker passed through the air. Not light, information. Something vast and distant brushing against the edge of their reality like a thought too large for the room it entered. She stiffened. "They have initiated planetary alignment sequence," she said quietly. He blinked. "That is not a sentence I enjoy hearing." Above them, the sky did something wrong. At first it looked like clouds rearranging themselves, but then the geometry became too deliberate. Angles formed where there should have been curves. The horizon folded inward, as if the planet was being gently picked up between unseen fingers. The retrieval protocol was not coming for them. It was coming for Earth. Her long ears trembled. "My civilization did not expect my displacement to anchor here." That's a polite way of saying we're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yes, classic Earth experience. She looked at him then, not as a subject, not as an anomaly, but as something she had failed to categorize. "If they complete synchronization, your planet will be displaced into suborbital discard space." He thought about that for a moment. So bad. Yes, like misrent deadline, bad, or existence ends bad. She paused. Second category. He nodded. "Cool, just checking." For the first time, she lowered her slate without writing. "There is one corrective action," she said, "but it requires interface with planetary field architecture. I cannot do it alone." He laughed once. "You want me to help you stop the end of the world? You have previously demonstrated willingness to obstruct armed personnel," she said. "This is conceptually similar." That is the worst job recommendation I've ever received. Yet he stepped closer anyway. The sky above fractured further. Cities across the horizon flickered in and out of alignment, as if Earth was struggling to stay properly rendered. She placed her hand against his wrist. "This will require synchronization with my neural lattice." "Sounds painful." "Only emotionally." "That's worse." Still, he nodded. Her ears lifted slightly as she began the connection, and suddenly the world was not a world anymore. It was signals, layers, frequencies wrapped around gravity like language around meaning. He felt the planet not as ground beneath him, but as something listening. "Okay," he muttered through the sensation. "I officially understand why people don't read the terms and conditions of reality." She almost smiled. "Focus." Above them, the retrieval structure locked fully into place. A vast geometry descending through dimensional thresholds, preparing to lift Earth out of its trajectory like a misplaced object. She began to speak, but not aloud. The words formed through field resonance, through magnetic tension, through the planet itself learning a new sentence. And he did something very human. He added his voice, not in language, in stubbornness, in refusal, in every stupid, reckless decision that had led him to standing between impossible weapons and things that insisted they were allowed to win. The structure hesitated. For the first time, it recalculated. She pushed the signal further, threading her civilization's command architecture through Earth's chaotic but surprisingly resilient systems. Traffic grids, weather models, old abandoned transit networks still humming under forgotten cities. The planet responded like it had been waiting for instructions it never believed it would receive. The retrieval geometry fractured. Slowly, carefully, almost offended. Then it collapsed sideways into a harmless orbit correction, like someone realizing mid-action they had picked up the wrong planet entirely and quietly deciding not to admit it. The sky stopped breaking. Silence returned in pieces. The drones fell still, hovering uncertainly, their mission parameters dissolving into bureaucratic confusion. One by one, they powered down, as if embarrassed to still be present. Somewhere far above, the military channel issued what could only be described as a very long pause followed by, "We will review this incident." The city exhaled. He collapsed onto the ground immediately afterward. Okay, he said weakly. I think I just negotiated with physics. I want that on my resume. She knelt beside him. Her long ears slowly relaxed for the first time since he had met her. You stabilized an extinction-level event through incompatibly structured emotional interference, she said. That's your way of saying I panicked correctly. Yes. Nice. A beat passed. Then she added more quietly, I will not be retrieved. He looked at her. Good. She tilted her head. This is the part where you ask why I remain. He thought about it, then shrugged. Honestly, you seem like you'd be a nightmare to file paperwork for. I respect that. For the first time, she made a sound that might have been laughter in a different galaxy. Days later, the city rebuilt itself around the idea that nothing had happened, as cities always do. Reports were edited, skies were reclassified, and official statements agreed that reality had behaved within acceptable variance. No one mentioned the alien woman with long ears anymore, or the human who kept standing in front of things that should have erased him. Except in the maintenance corridors, where old systems still whispered ghost routes, there were occasional logs marked with strange notes about two anomalies traveling together, one who learned to bend reality and one who refused to step out of its way. And sometimes, when he looked up at the night sky beside her, he would say, So, are we done with planet-level emergencies? She would consider it seriously, ears twitching faintly. Statistically, she said, no. He sighed. Great. I was worried we were getting boring. The days after the sky stopped breaking did not feel like peace. They felt like the universe pretending it had never raised its voice. The city slowly returned to its usual state of organized confusion. Drones resumed their unrelated hobbies, traffic platforms argued with each other about right-of-way, and public announcements went back to reassuring everyone that normal operations had resumed, which was always a suspicious thing to say in a place where normal had been retired years ago. He noticed something else, though. The soldiers did not return. At first, there were rumors, official ones wrapped in careful language. Retrieval protocol suspended. Interference classified as unresolved anomaly. Then came the quiet withdrawal of search grids, the polite disappearance of surveillance sweeps, the gradual realization that whatever had been hunting them had decided it was no longer confident in its own paperwork. He found that deeply satisfying. She, however, did not celebrate. Instead, she stood at the edge of a high transit bridge, long ears angled toward the sky as if listening for a reply that never arrived. The luminous slate in her hand remained dark for longer than he had ever seen it. They are gone, she said finally. That's usually good news, he replied. In most cultures. She glanced at him. My culture prefers certainty of jurisdiction. Your culture sounds exhausting. It is efficient. He leaned on the railing beside her. So what now? Do you get promoted, demoted, recalled, given a strongly worded cosmic email? She considered this. I am no longer within their command structure. A pause, he blinked. That sounds like freedom. She tested the word silently, as if it might trigger a hidden system response. Freedom, she repeated. It is not in my vocabulary protocols. Then it's probably new, he said. Congratulations, you've been upgraded to unpredictable. She did not understand at first, but then she made a sound that resembled the early stages of amusement. That is statistically undesirable. Yeah, he nodded. Welcome to Earth. For a while, neither of them spoke. Below, the city continued its loud, unbothered existence, pretending it had never been used as a backdrop for planetary negotiations. Eventually, she turned to him. You will continue to be targeted, she said. He sighed. Can we not start the conversation with that? I am being precise. I am being emotionally fragile. Please adjust. She tilted her head. My presence increases your probability of encountering high-level existential threats. That's just Tuesday for me at this point. A pause, then she said something unexpected. I do not wish to leave. That caught him off guard more than any collapsing sky or stopping time ever had. You do? He asked. I have evaluated all known trajectories, she said. None result in higher anomaly stability than this one. He squinted. Are you saying I'm stable? You are an unpredictable constant, she corrected. It is different. That sounds like a compliment if you don't think about it too hard. She looked away briefly, ears shifting slightly. I have also learned that your species experiences something called choice. It is inefficient but compelling. He laughed softly. That might be the nicest insult I've ever received. She extended her hand, not in command, not in necessity, but in decision. "I choose this trajectory," she said. He stared at her hand for a moment, then took it. "You're going to regret that. I barely know where my socks are most days. I have recorded this risk." "Of course you have." And just like that, the universe did not end. It did not explode, or fold, or reassign them to different dimensions. It simply continued, slightly more complicated than before. Weeks later, they sat on a rooftop watching the city argue with itself about sunset lighting algorithms. She had learned to drink coffee now, though she still treated it like a suspicious chemical experiment. He had learned to stop asking if every passing shadow was a government operation, mostly because the answer was often, yes, but minor. "So," he said at one point, "we saved Earth." "Yes," she replied, "and I helped." "Yes. That feels important." "It is statistically significant," she agreed. He nodded. "Cool, I'd like that on a shirt." She paused. "What is a shirt?" He groaned. "We are starting over again, aren't we?" She looked at him, long ears catching the fading light, and for the first time her expression carried something that did not belong to analysis or survival probability. "I believe," she said carefully, "we are continuing." He smiled at that. Above them, satellites adjusted their orbits slightly, as if the sky itself had learned to give them space. Somewhere far beyond Earth, a civilization that once tried to retrieve her recalculated its understanding of failure and decided, very quietly, to stop trying. On the rooftop, the wind passed between them like a shared secret, and for once, neither of them ran.